Night has already settled over the city by the sea, and the house around you grows still, holding its breath as the last distant noises fade into a soft, unbroken hush. Here, in the atrium, the world becomes smaller, safer, a quiet chamber of stone and lamplight, open to the sky through the dark mouth of the compluvium above. In a moment, the storm will reach you. You will hear the first drops gather, feel the cool shift in the air, and watch the marble basin of the impluvium awaken under the touch of the rain. For now, you simply stand in this calm before the weather arrives, wrapped in shadow, warmth, and the gentle rhythm of an ancient night. High in the darkness, the first drops of the storm arrive almost shyly, tapping against the tiles, drumming against the eaves, searching out the angles and the hollows of the roof as if they needed to learn the shape of it anew. The sound begins thin and scattered, like fingers exploring the surface of a drum, an uncertain pattern of soft taps and tiny runs, and then slowly gathers into a rhythm, a soft, patient insistence that spreads across the whole roof and settles over the house like another layer of night. This house, built to welcome rain inward rather than fear it, seems to lean into the weather, inviting it to fall where it will be most useful, where it can slide along the terracotta and down the channels, then sink into the waiting cisterns and sleep beneath the floor until some drier day calls it back. For a moment you simply stand and listen, shoulders loosening, breath deepening, as the world beyond the walls blurs into the simple pattern of water, stone, and air. The day's noise, the rumble of carts, the voices in the forum, the clatter of sandals on paving, all of it falls away, washed clean in your memory by the steady, growing hush of the storm. You feel the coolness of the atrium around you, a quiet square of space that seems almost afloat between the earth and the troubled sky, and in that suspended place you let yourself be still, feeling the gentle weight of your own arms at your sides, the easy rise and fall of your chest, the soft, almost imperceptible sway of your body as it unconsciously adjusts to keep its balance. The lamps have already been lit. Around the edges of the atrium, small clay and bronze lamps burn with steady, almond-shaped flames, each one drinking slowly from its pool of olive oil, each one turning the darkness into layers of amber and shadow that cling to columns and corners. Their light gathers on the polished floor, on the pale rim of the impluvium, on the painted walls where faded gardens and gods seem to hold their breath and watch the rain with you, the pigments softened by age into gentle tones that are kinder to the eyes at night than they ever are under the harsh light of noon. On the plaster, the lamplight trembles in long, slow waves, catching on every unevenness, every faint crack where time has left its fingerprints. It flows up along the fluted shafts of the columns, then slides away again, leaving the high beams and roof timbers in deep shadow. The air itself seems to glow in places, thin threads of light weaving between smoke and dust, turning each breath into something you can almost see. A slave passes quietly behind you, bare feet whispering over the mosaic, carrying another lamp cupped in both hands as if it were something living. The light sways and stretches across the plaster, painting his shadow tall and thin, briefly doubling him, so that for an instant it looks as if two figures move through the atrium in perfect silence. Then he disappears through a side doorway toward the corridor that leads to the kitchen, his presence shrinking to the soft swish of cloth and the almost inaudible clink of lamp against bronze ring. The faint trace of smoke and warm metal from a brazier drifts after him, folding into the cool smell of wet stone that is beginning to seep down through the compluvium. Somewhere, a draft draws the fumes gently upward toward the opening in the roof, so that the house can breathe even as it closes itself up for the night, exhaling the last remnants of the day while it inhales the clean, damp air of the storm. The rain grows stronger. It finds the opening with ease now, pouring through like silver threads, straight and bright against the dark shaft of air, the space above the impluvium suddenly alive with faint glimmers and quiet motion. The first drops strike the water in the impluvium with clear, round notes, sending ripples outward that catch and break the reflections of the lamps and the pale underside of the roof beams. The little pool becomes a restless mirror, showing you broken pieces of the rafters and a strange, shimmering version of your own face, stretched and reassembled by each new ring of water. You watch the rain for a while without thinking, eyes tracing the fall of each drop as if it were a separate thing, and in that simple act of watching, something inside you begins to loosen, like a knot worked slowly free by patient fingers. Behind you, at the far wall of the atrium, the household shrine waits in its familiar niche, as constant as the line where floor meets wall, as present in your awareness as your own breath. The lararium is small, no larger than your outstretched arms, but it holds a whole invisible crowd that seems to press forward from the painted plaster. Painted Lares dance there in their short bright tunics, arms raised in perpetual celebration. The genius of the house stands between them in a white toga, holding out a shallow bowl that catches a tiny crescent of lamplight. Below, a coiled serpent curls toward a tiny painted altar, heavy with meaning and promise, its painted scales suggested with quick strokes that somehow still manage to hint at coiled strength. The stucco around them is painted in warm reds and creams, and in the flicker of the lamplight their faces seem to move, shadows deepening the eyes, gold and ochre catching at the edges where the brush once passed, as if the very act of worship painted into the wall were still continuing, night after night. You step closer, drawn by habit more than thought, feet knowing the exact path from compluvium to shrine without any need for sight. The small stone ledge beneath the shrine is cool under your fingertips, the edge slightly smoothed by years of hands resting there in just this way. Someone has already set out offerings this evening, a little dish of honey cakes, their surfaces slightly cracked where the crust cooled, a small cup with a mouthful of wine, dark and still, a spray of green leaves from the peristyle garden, drops of water still clinging to the stems where they were rinsed under the fountain. Another lamp burns just below the niche, its flame steady, its wick trimmed carefully so it does not smoke, the clay body faintly warm where the heat of the oil has begun to seep outward. The smell of olive oil here is stronger, shaded by a thin ghost of incense from earlier in the evening, still clinging to the plaster like a memory of sweetness and resin. If you lean in slightly, you can almost feel the difference in the air, a subtle change in temperature and scent that marks this spot as set apart from the rest of the atrium, as if a soft, unseen boundary wrapped itself around the niche and its offerings. This is the bright, watching center of the house, the place where your family's quiet prayers and fears and hopes gather and settle like fine dust. Here, the worries spoken aloud and those kept only in the heart come to rest together, concerns about harvest or trade, about health and childbirth, about journeys and returns, about the fragile thread that keeps a household whole from one season to the next. The very plaster seems to hold whispers, as if every anxious thought and every grateful sigh left some trace of itself in the walls. You rest your hand for a moment on the little altar and let your shoulders fall again. The stone under your palm is cool, but not unfriendly. It takes the warmth of your skin and holds it gently. It has been a long day. The storm outside, the solid walls, the all-seeing gods, the steady lamplight, together they feel like a promise that the night will be held, that nothing needs to be decided now, that you may lay your thoughts down here for a while and come back to them only when the sun returns. Around you, the ordinary work of closing the house for the night goes on, each familiar sound steadying in its predictability. From the vestibule, near the street, comes the heavy, satisfying thud of the door bar being dropped into place, the wooden beam settling into its stone or bronze sockets with a resonance you can feel faintly in the soles of your feet. The echo spreads along the corridor like a quiet announcement. The world outside is now firmly apart from the world within. In one of the side rooms, a shutter bangs once, twice, caught in the gusts of wind that slip through even the smallest cracks, and then is caught and held by quick hands. The rattle ceases, replaced by the small, careful sounds of wood against wood as the hook is set firmly into its ring and the shutters are drawn tight against the rain. A girl crosses the atrium with a folded wool cloak over her arm, the hem of her tunic brushing just above her ankles, her hair twisted in a simple knot at the nape of her neck and pinned with a bone clasp that glints once in the lamplight. The cloak's fabric is thick and slightly rough, dark in color, the sort of garment that smells of lanolin and smoke when it is wet. She pauses beside the impluvium, watching the water for a heartbeat, her face softened by the reflected light, the lamplight turning her features almost unfamiliar for that brief moment as it flickers in her eyes. Then she continues toward the cubiculum where her mistress is already preparing for sleep, her steps light but unhurried, as if the storm outside had removed the last trace of urgency from the house. Near the entrance to the peristyle, a boy stoops to gather up a forgotten wax tablet and stylus from a bench, fingers leaving faint, damp marks where they touch the cool surface. The wax bears the faint ghost of earlier writing, smoothed but not entirely erased, lines and grooves catching tiny shadows. Someone murmurs his name from the dimness beyond, and he straightens quickly, tablet hugged against his chest, and hurries into the deeper part of the house, his steps light, almost soundless, the soft slap of bare soles on mosaic fading quickly into the general hush. The storm answers all these small human movements with its own steady language. Rain on tile, a continuous drumming that shifts whenever the wind turns. Rain through the opening, falling with a more vertical insistence into the open heart of the house. Rain on water, a finer, more musical sound as each drop strikes the impluvium. Far away, beyond the house, thunder mutters to itself over the sea, too distant to startle, only there to remind you how small and sheltered this bright, square atrium really is, and how the walls around you form not just a boundary but a kind of embrace. You move to the edge of the impluvium and sit, careful on the marble, feeling the chill of the stone seep slowly through the fabric of your tunic until you become aware of the exact shape of the seat beneath you. The basin is filling now, the water climbing the sides in small, patient increments that leave a dark, glistening mark wherever they pass. Underneath the surface, the carved lines and inlay of the marble blur and soften, turning into shifting patterns that appear and disappear with each new ring of raindrops. Here and there, a tiny trapped bubble of air shines for a moment, then escapes upward and vanishes with a barely visible wink. You trail your fingers along the outer rim, feeling the smoothness, the almost invisible irregularities where time and water have worn away at tiny edges, finding with the tips of your fingers each microscopic dip and rise as if you were reading the history of the house and the stone. Your bare feet rest on mosaic, tiny tesserae set in careful rows and curves, dark and light stones forming patterns that you know so well you hardly see them by day. Tonight, in lamplight, they seem to rearrange themselves. The darker pieces recede into shadow while the pale ones glow faintly like submerged stars, marking out swirls and borders and stylized shapes that echo leaves or waves or geometric dreams. The floor is cool, almost cold in places where the moisture in the air has settled. And the sensation of it grounds you more deeply than any thought could. You inhale slowly. The air is cool and tastes faintly of wet lime and ancient dust, with a thread of oil and smoke winding through it. Each breath feels easier than the last, expanding gently into your chest, then flowing out without any need for effort. There is nothing pressing now, no client to receive in the atrium, no letter to dictate in the tablinum, no decision about markets or magistrates or tenants. All the daytime concerns that once seemed like stone pillars now reveal themselves as lighter things, mist-like, able to drift away for a few hours. The city beyond is blurred by the storm. In here, the only task is to sit and listen and let the body do what it has been wanting to do since late afternoon, soften, slow, and begin to surrender. In this moment, even the passage of time seems to thin, stretching out so that each heartbeat has room around it. From the kitchen, down the corridor that leads away from the atrium, comes the last exhale of the day's cooking, audible not as a single sound but as a slow unwinding of small noises and scents. A faint scent of warm bread and herbs lingers in the air, carried in thin, invisible ribbons that slide along the cooler currents drifting down from the compluvium. It mingles with the oil from the lamps, with the washed clay smell of the floor, with the cool trace of rain, forming a quiet, complex aroma that belongs only to this house at this hour. Somewhere beyond your line of sight, a slave is banking the coals in the hearth, spreading them out so they will smolder gently through the night, ready to catch kindling easily at dawn. You can almost hear the flat, careful movements of the iron poker, the soft rustle of ash being shifted, the occasional tiny, sharp crackle as a piece of charcoal breaks and glows more brightly for a moment. A pot is lifted, its lid clinks against the rim, then settles with a sealed, soft sound that signals an end more than any words could. Metal meets stone faintly as tools are hung or set aside, the small impacts cushioned by cloth or habit so as not to disturb those already drifting toward sleep. Sometimes a whisper of voices rises, very low, not words so much as the warm hum of human presence, then fades again as each person turns to their own preparations for the night. You imagine the small, smoky space of the culina, the blackened walls, shiny where countless fires have licked them, the narrow openings for light that now admit only darkness and the occasional flash of distant lightning, the low counter with its simple utensils laid out in neat, familiar order. You have stood there sometimes in the morning, to speak with the cook, to taste the first bread just pulled from the heat. You know how the warmth wraps around the body in a way that is almost like being embraced. Now it exists only as smells and muted sounds, another pocket of warmth inside the larger warmth of the house, a hidden ember in the wide body of the domus. The rain beats steadily overhead. Water flows from tile to tile, finds the eaves, plunges downward. You can hear it in the peristyle as well, a slightly different note, rain striking leaves and earth, rain hitting the lip of a fountain, the softer, more irregular sounds of water on living things, which answer not with echo but with absorption, each leaf holding a drop for a moment before letting it fall with its own quiet voice. You rise and walk slowly toward the garden court, the soles of your sandals whispering on stone, your steps naturally shortening as the coolness deepens with each pace away from the brazier's remembered warmth. The peristyle opens up ahead, framed by its ring of columns, each one a pale, solid presence rising between the dark garden and the sheltered walk. Beyond them, the sky is nothing but a deep, cloud-cloaked darkness, but you can feel its presence in the breath of wind that moves through the colonnade and brushes against your cheeks, bringing with it a damp chill and the faint scent of earth and leaves washed clean. The plants are silhouettes, low shrubs with rounded forms, tall, thin trunks that break into clusters of shadow higher up. A vine tracing its way up a column in irregular loops that your eyes follow almost without willing it. Raindrops beat on leaves and fall in their own time, gathering patiently at the tips before gravity persuades them to let go, creating a gentle counterpoint to the more insistent drumming on the roofs. A small fountain in the center overflows, its usual fine spray blurred now into a more chaotic play of water as the rain joins it from above. The basin around it reflects whatever light reaches it from the atrium and from a single lamp hung under the colonnade. The reflection trembles with every drop, turning the column shadows into wavering dark spears that lengthen and shorten without pattern, sometimes breaking entirely when a larger drop lands squarely in the water's heart. You stay under the shelter of the colonnade, where the roof keeps the direct rain away but the air is more open, fresher, charged with the night's cool breath. The stone beneath your feet is colder here, closer to the dampness of the garden, and a faint trace of moisture has crept into the surface, making it just smooth enough that you are aware of every shift of balance. You wrap your arms lightly around yourself and stand for a while, listening to the world beyond the walls, a distant cart, its wheels splashing through a puddle in some far-off street, a late shout, quickly swallowed by the rain until it becomes indistinguishable from the thunder's low growl, the faint bark of a dog answering some sound only it can hear, the strong, clear crack of a door being shut somewhere down the street, followed by silence. All of it feels far away, as if it belonged to another life. Here, beneath your own roof, the rhythms are quieter, slower, shaped entirely by the needs of this one house and the lives it contains. The garden breathes softly in the dark, each plant drinking in the moisture, each stone path darkened by wetness, and you find that standing there, simply existing between stone and air and water, is strangely more restful than any soft couch could be. It is as if the night itself were inviting you to loosen your grip on every concern and simply be one more quiet thing in this sheltered square of earth. When you return to the atrium, the lamps seem warmer, the air almost tender by comparison, as if the house itself has drawn its own cloak closer against the chill outside. A brazier has been brought out and set near one of the side walls, away from any hanging draperies or stored cloth. The shallow bronze bowl glows with banked coals, threads of orange and red sliding through the dark charcoal like veins of molten metal hidden beneath rock. A young slave kneels beside it, poker in hand, coaxing the embers into a more even bed with practiced, economical movements that disturb as little ash as possible. The faint crackle of charcoal breaking lifts into the air, bringing with it the dry, comforting smell of ash and heated metal, a scent that speaks of winter evenings and long nights of talk or quiet work under lamplight. You watch as he adds 2 small pieces of kindling and a thin stick of resinous wood. The flames answer slowly, first as a thin tongue of blue at the edge of a coal, then as a more confident orange that curls around the new wood before sinking back, leaving behind a new layer of gentle glow. The boy sits back on his heels and rubs his hands together once, quickly, before standing, his movements careful so as not to scatter any embers. The heat from the brazier strokes your shins, your hands, the side of your face turned toward it, while the air at your back remains touched by the cooler drafts from the compluvium and the garden beyond. The contrast between warm front and cool back makes you suddenly, pleasantly aware of the weight of your own body, its solidity and presence in this pool of light. Nearby, someone has placed a low wooden stool and a folded cloth. The grain of the wood is darkened and glossy where years of hands have touched it, along the edges, small nicks and dents catch shadows, tiny records of everyday use. The cloth is soft, worn by many nights of use and countless washings, its fibers no longer crisp but yielding, ready to take on the shape of whatever they touch. You sit, close enough to feel the brazier's comfort but far enough that the heat is never sharp, only gradual, seeping into your legs, your hands, your chest, as if the metal bowl were patiently pouring warmth into you in slow, steady measures. The lararium draws your eye again, its little world of painted figures and quiet offerings glowing at the far end of the atrium like a small, steady constellation. One of the elders of the household stands before it now, a cup of wine in her hands. Her hair is streaked with gray and bound with a simple ribbon, the strands drawn back from her face in smooth, practiced lines. Her tunic is of wool dyed a deep, restful color, its folds falling in soft, measured creases that testify to long familiarity rather than fashion. The lamp at the shrine's base shines upward, softening the lines of her face, filling the slight hollows of her cheeks with warm light, drawing a quiet gleam along the fine bones around her eyes. She bows her head for a moment, the cord at her neck shifting slightly with the motion, then lifts the cup slightly, as if offering the wine to the painted figures whose gaze never wavers. Her lips move in a familiar evening formula, thanking the Lares for their protection this day, asking that they watch through the night, that they keep the house whole, the children safe, the slaves gentle, the dreams free of ill omen. The words are too soft to carry far, swallowed almost at once by the wide, listening space of the atrium and the even wider listening of the rain, but their shape and rhythm are known to you. You have heard them in one form or another for as long as you can remember. Offerings have been part of this house for as long as you can remember as well, a thread that connects days, seasons, generations, all tied to this one little painted niche, so that each cup of wine poured out is not just tonight's gesture, but also an echo of countless evenings behind it. When she is finished, She pours a small measure of wine into the shallow dish on the altar, the dark liquid catching the light in a brief, rounded gleam before it settles into stillness. Then she raises the cup to her own lips, taking a modest sip before turning and passing it to you with a movement that is both ritual and simple kindness. The wine is cool, touched with the earlier warmth of the day, the sour-sweet tang familiar and grounding as it rests on your tongue for a moment before you swallow. You share the cup, one after another, each person taking a small taste, each one touching the altar or the side of the niche with fingertips or the back of the hand, each brushing, in their own way, against the unseen boundary between human and divine that seems thinnest here. The circle is small: family, trusted slaves, those whose lives are woven together tightly enough to share this quiet. When the cup returns to the elder, she sets it down carefully beside the other small offerings, the base of the vessel making a soft, solid sound against the stone. For a while the only light in the shrine is the steady, silent lamp and the slow, invisible breath of the household spirits, imagined but no less real in their watchfulness. The painted figures hold their eternal poses, the little serpent curls toward its painted altar, the cup of wine and the honey cakes and the green leaves all rest in their appointed places. Outside, the storm continues its patient work. Inside, beneath the watchful gaze of gods and ancestors, the house begins to sink more deeply into its own kind of sleep, and you feel yourself sinking with it, gently, as if the floor itself were softening beneath your feet. The night goes on in its own unhurried way, and the house follows its rhythm. One by one, people drift away from the atrium toward their sleeping places, drawn not by any order given aloud but by the slow, irresistible pull of habit and fatigue. Some carry lamps, the little flames cupped carefully in their hands so the oil does not spill and the wick does not gutter when a stray draft slips through a doorway. Others trust the patterns of the house so well that they walk mostly by memory and the faint spill of light from doorways, navigating by the familiar feel of thresholds underfoot, the known distances between column and wall. In a cubiculum near the peristyle, a child protests sleep with a soft, half-hearted whimper that rises and falls like a tiny wave against the greater sea of the storm, which is met with a murmur and a gentle shushing sound, the quiet shift of a mattress, then silence broken only by the light, steady breathing of two bodies settling together. Doors close not with sharp bangs but with careful, measured motions, each final click of wood into wood sounding like a small, private sealing away of the day. You remain for a little while longer, letting the house empty around you in its own time, not hurrying it, not resisting it. The atrium feels wider now, the space between each column more pronounced, the shadows stretching longer across the floor as the number of burning lamps gradually diminishes. The air seems to grow thicker with quiet, the echoes of earlier footsteps and voices fading until only the smallest sounds remain. Each sound is easier to notice, the sole of a sandal slipping a little on damp stone, the soft creak of a door closing and the momentary pause before the latch settles, the faint rustle of fabric as someone draws a curtain across the entrance to a cubiculum. Somewhere deep in the house there is the muffled tumble of a piece of pottery being stacked away in a cupboard or on a shelf, followed by the stillness that comes when even the last small tasks of the day have been completed. You can feel the shift almost physically, as if the entire house has taken a long breath in and is now slowly exhaling. The storm has hit its stride. Rain pours through the compluvium in a bright, dense curtain, white against the darkness above, each droplet catching a fragment of lamplight for a heartbeat before joining the mass. The impluvium receives it without complaint, its surface churning gently, drops exploding into rings that collide and break and form again, the water rising slowly but steadily in the pool. Occasionally, a thicker drop or a stray trickle from the roof leaps higher than the rest, catching for a split second the gleam of lamplight before it vanishes back into the hole, leaving behind only widening ripples and the faint, crystalline sound of water meeting water. Above, you can hear the constant drumming on the tiles, a sound that is no longer separate drops but a single, immense, soothing roar that wraps itself around the house like another wall. It is powerful but not threatening, more like the deep, regular breathing of some peaceful giant lying over the city than any kind of rage. At last, your own body calls you toward rest, more persuasively than any voice could. You stand and, for the first time in hours, feel how heavy your limbs have become, as if the day had slowly poured itself into your muscles without your noticing. Your shoulders echo the ache of the day, the faint tightness where a satchel strap rested, the lingering memory of an earlier posture of alertness that no longer has any use now that the doors are barred and the business of the day is done. The base of your neck holds a thin line of fatigue, which begins to ease the moment you allow your head to tilt slightly, letting the weight of your skull rest more fully on your spine. Your feet, so used to stone, feel pleasantly dull and warm, the slight soreness in the arches transforming into something almost comforting when you finally acknowledge it, a small proof that you have lived fully through the day that is now ending. You move toward your cubiculum, the small bedroom that opens off the atrium, walking more slowly than you did earlier in the evening, each step measured by the quiet rather than by any urgency. The familiar mosaic flows beneath you, patterns you know by heart appearing and disappearing in the shifting lamplight as you pass. The doorway is low and familiar, you have passed under it so many times that your body adjusts without thought, your head inclining just enough to avoid the lintel. In the brief moment when you stand in the threshold, you feel the difference between spaces, behind you the wider, echoing volume of the atrium with its open sky, before you the smaller, enclosed calm of the cubiculum, a pocket of stillness carved out from the larger body of the house. Inside, the air is cooler and more still than in the central space, carrying only a faint trace of lamp smoke and the subtle, dry scent of textiles and wood. The lamplight from the atrium reaches only a short distance into the room, stretching into a thin, wavering line along the floor, then fading into shadow that fills the corners with soft, indistinct shapes. On a small stand just inside the door, a lamp of your own already burns, lit by a careful hand earlier in the evening in anticipation of this moment, its small flame steady and patient, as if it too has been waiting for you. Its flame glows against the plaster walls, showing simple painted bands of color, a faded branch with a bird frozen mid-perch, a patch where someone once repaired a crack so neatly that only you can still see it when the light hits at a certain angle. Tiny irregularities in the plaster become landscapes in miniature under the moving light, a shallow groove suggests a valley, a small bump becomes a hill. The bed stands along one wall, a wooden frame on 4 sturdy legs, a woven support beneath a mattress stuffed with wool and cloth, covered in linen that has been washed and dried so many times it has become soft as breath. A folded wool blanket waits near the foot, heavy and reassuring in its very weight, its surface slightly rough beneath the fingers, promising warmth as much through its heft as through its fibers. The sight of it alone makes some deep place inside you relax another degree, as if a part of you had only been waiting to see this familiar, welcoming shape. You pause at the washing basin, letting the sight of it mark the boundary between the day that has passed and the night that is beginning. On a low stand near the wall sits a shallow bronze basin half filled with clear water, the surface reflecting the lamplight in a small, restless oval of gold that quivers each time a draft touches it or your hand brushes the stand. A folded linen cloth rests beside it, edges aligned with quiet care, the fabric bearing the faint stiffness of drying but already softening in the humid night air. You dip your hands into the water. It is cool, almost cold in the chill of the night, and the shock of it brings a clean, precise awareness back to your fingers, your wrists, the delicate bones beneath the skin, as if the cold were a careful hand tracing each joint and tendon. You splash your face, the droplets running down over closed eyes, along the line of your jaw, into the hollow of your throat, leaving tiny trails that cool quickly in the moving air. The sensation wipes away the last residue of smoke and dust from the day, the grit of the streets, the faint sheen of sweat left by hours of movement, the invisible touch of many other lives intersecting with your own. It carves out a fresher space inside your tiredness, a small clearing in which weariness can be acknowledged without becoming oppressive. When you lift the cloth and press it lightly against your face, it smells faintly of linen and whatever soap or ash was used last in its washing, a clean, neutral scent that has no story of its own and so does not intrude on your thoughts. The damp fabric leaves your skin cool and slightly tight for a moment before the warmth underneath seeps back through. Outside the doorway, in the atrium, the storm murmurs to itself, its voice softened by the thickness of the walls and the narrowness of the opening. Thunder rolls, softer now, further away, its once sharp edges worn down by distance into something closer to a sigh than a roar. The rain continues, a steady, patient presence, like someone humming under their breath in another room, unaware that anyone can hear. The sounds drift in and out of your awareness as easily as your own breathing, sometimes at the forefront, sometimes no more than a texture beneath the stillness, so that you are never quite sure whether you are listening to the storm or to the slow workings of your own body. You loosen your clothing, each small motion another step away from the demands of the day. The belt that has been snug around your waist all day now slides free with surprising ease, the leather passing through the buckle with a quiet whisper. The weight of the fabric shifts, falls more loosely around you, and you feel the muscles of your abdomen relax into the space that has been created, no longer held in by habit and posture. You slip off your outer cloak and lay it over the low chest near the bed, smoothing the folds once, out of habit, so it will not crease too sharply, the wool settling into soft waves under your hands. The tunic beneath hangs more lightly on your shoulders, its wool warmed by your own skin, its neckline and sleeve seems familiar against your collarbones and arms. Your feet, freed from sandals, meet the cool mosaic of the floor directly. The small stones press gently into your soles, each shift of weight making a new pattern of sensation, mapping out the exact shape of your feet in pressure and release. A faint chill travels up through your calves, encouraging you toward the waiting blankets, but not urgently. It is the kind of coolness that makes the thought of warmth more inviting rather than the kind that stings. You reach for the small amulet that hangs on a thong at your neck, feeling the familiar shape, perhaps a tiny phallic charm for protection, perhaps a little figure of Fortuna, and let your thumb rest on it for a moment before you let it fall back against your chest, the cool surface briefly imprinting its outline on your skin. That single, silent touch feels like a closing bracket to the day's uncertainties. These are small gestures, ordinary and unremarkable, but together they signal to your body what your mind already knows: there is nothing more to be done tonight. The tasks are finished. The house is closed. The gods are fed and honored. Contracts, accounts, alliances, decisions, all of them live outside this room now, in another layer of your life that can be reached again tomorrow but does not need to be touched at this hour. You are allowed to be nothing more, for these hours, than a breathing, resting body on a bed, a simple living creature letting the night do its slow, patient work. The recognition of this is not dramatic, it is a quiet loosening inside. A sense that every part of you has finally been given permission to stop holding on. You slide onto the mattress and feel it receive you with a familiarity that is almost a kind of welcome. The wool stuffing shifts beneath your weight, settling into a shape that matches the result of countless previous nights, the fibers remembering the curve of your shoulders and hips, the way your spine prefers to lie. Your shoulder blades sink into the gentle give, your hips find their place, your head discovers the narrow pillow that is always a little firmer than you remember at first touch, but which will feel just right once you have lain on it for a while and your body has softened into it. The bed creaks very faintly, a small, honest sound of wood and rope acknowledging your presence, then settles back into stillness. The linen against your skin is cool for a moment, then slowly gathers your warmth, the fabric shifting from chilled to neutral to pleasantly tempered as your body heat seeps into it. When you pull the blanket over yourself, the weight presses down in a way that is not restricting but reassuring, a soft, firm hand laid over your whole body, from shoulders to feet. You adjust once or twice, finding the angle where your knees and back and neck all agree, making tiny movements until each part of you feels supported and none feels strained, and then you simply lie still, allowing the bed to hold you rather than holding yourself up against it. The simple act of no longer needing to maintain your own posture feels like stepping into a deeper layer of ease. The lamp on the bedside stand burns low. Its flame is smaller than those in the atrium, its oil rationed carefully so that it will last until the faintest gray of dawn if left alone. Shadows gather in the corners of the room, thickening into gentle pools where furniture becomes suggestion rather than shape. The ceiling fades into darkness, no longer a defined surface but an absence in which your thoughts can dissolve if they choose. Your hands rest loosely at your sides, or one folds over your abdomen, rising and falling almost imperceptibly with your breath, the skin of your palms warmed by the nearness of your own body, your fingers no longer needing to grip anything at all. Through the open doorway, the atrium remains a distant presence, a quiet heart still beating at the center of the house. From your pillow, you cannot see the impluvium directly, but you can see its borrowed light. Reflections from the water throw tiny, shifting patterns up onto the far wall, pale wavering bands that move whenever the rain or the lamps do, sliding slowly over plaster and beam like restless, luminous threads. They drift and dance in a pace too slow to follow consciously, but not so slow that they are still. If you watch them for more than a few breaths, your eyes begin to lose track of where each line begins and ends, and it becomes easier simply to let them exist at the edge of your attention, a quiet, moving tapestry woven by water and flame. The sounds of the storm filter in more gently here, softened by distance and walls into something rounder and more continuous. The sharp drum of rain on tile is transformed into a softer roar, a continuous rushing that fills the background of your hearing like wind in a forest or surf on a sheltered shore. Closer, you can catch the lighter, more distinct notes of drops falling all the way through the compluvium to strike the water's surface, the quiet, ringing plink repeated in hundreds of variations, some high and quick, some lower and more resonant depending on where and how they land. Sometimes they merge into brief, delicate cascades when a small stream runs from a corner of the roof, then separate again into individual impacts. Every now and then thunder speaks again, but only in long, rolling murmurs, like someone turning over in sleep far away, heavy and slow and entirely uninterested in you. The city beyond has gone almost silent. The last cart is long returned to its yard, the taverns have dimmed their flames, even the dogs have given up announcing every passing shadow. Only the rain remains, steady, impartial, falling on tiled roofs, on flat terraces, on temple pediments, on the dark open mouths of streets, and on the invisible sea beyond, drawing a vast, unseen veil of water over everything alike. The knowledge that all of this is happening outside while you lie here within adds another layer of safety, as if the world were being wrapped in the same soft darkness that covers you. As you lie there, you notice your own body in the same way you have been noticing the house, as if it too were a place built of many parts, each with its own quiet work to do. The soles of your feet are warm now under the blanket, the little ache in your calves from the day's walking has changed into a pleasant heaviness, a dull, spacious sensation that asks for nothing but stillness. Your knees feel gently cradled by the mattress, neither pressed nor suspended. Your hips rest in a position that allows your lower back to lengthen and soften. Your hands feel distant, as if they belong to someone else for a while. They lie open, fingers slightly curled, no longer ready to grasp or gesture, simply existing. Your jaw releases that last, unnoticed clench. Your tongue settles in your mouth without pressing against your teeth. Your eyelids rest naturally over your eyes, no longer held at any particular angle. Your breath moves in and out without effort, each inhalation cool and narrow at the nostrils, each exhalation warmer and wider, spilling softly into the air. If you pay attention, you can feel the air travel further, down the back of the throat, into the chest, expanding the ribs, then sinking lower as the belly rises ever so slightly. Each breath draws in the faint smell of linen and wool and lamp oil, and each breath releases a little more of the day's tension, a little more of whatever your muscles had been holding onto without your consent. Breathing becomes something you are witnessing rather than something you are doing. Thoughts still wander up, of course. A name, a phrase from a conversation earlier in the day, the image of a merchant's face, the half-finished shape of a letter in your mind, a small worry about the roof tiles over the storage room and whether they will hold against this much water. But each thought rises, touches the surface of your awareness like a single raindrop, and then spreads out and dissolves into the larger sound of the storm, into the softness of the bedding, into the rhythm of your breathing. They arrive thinner and thinner each time, as if the very effort of forming themselves is becoming too much trouble. You do not have to push them away, the night does it for you, gently, the way a hand smooths wrinkles from a garment or dust from a surface. All you have to do is keep lying here, eyes half closed or fully closed, letting the body sink a little deeper into the mattress with each quiet sigh. The bed holds you, the blanket weighs you down just enough to keep you from floating away, and the space of the room seems to widen around you, granting you permission simply to exist without doing or deciding anything at all. There is a widening sense of acceptance, as if every part of you has come to an agreement that resting is now the only necessary task. Somewhere in the house, a slave makes one last circuit, moving through the dim corridors with a lamp held low. You hear, faintly, the padding of bare feet in the corridor outside, the careful opening of a door, the brief flare as a lamp is checked and then covered, the whisper of a curtain being drawn more securely across a doorway. There is the soft clink of metal against ceramic as a lamp is set more firmly in its niche, the nearly inaudible scrape of wood against stone as a shutter is tested to make sure it will not rattle loose in the wind. That presence is comforting rather than intrusive. Someone else is awake, paying attention to the embers, the doors, the small mechanical matters of safety, so that you and others can surrender more completely to sleep. Even the quiet sounds of their passage feel like part of a ritual that has been repeated night after night, long before you were born and long after you are gone. The lararium lamp still burns in the atrium, a small, steady point of light near the painted gods. Its glow does not reach you directly, but you know it is there, in the same way you know the cistern is filling with water beneath the floor, in the same way you know the city lies beyond the walls and the sea beyond the city. The house has its own internal map in your mind, a pattern built of steps and turns and thresholds and familiar cool spots on the floor, and you have carried this pattern in your body for so long that even in the dark, even half asleep, you could walk from bed to shrine with hardly a misstep. It is a kind of second sight, born not of visions but of repetition, of thousands of small crossings made without fanfare. You think briefly of the day to come, the morning salutatio in the atrium, the cool stone under your feet as you greet clients, the low voices and careful smiles that will fill the space where there is now only the rain, the smell of bread and wet earth if the storm continues into dawn, the way the air will feel washed and new when the first light comes in through the compluvium. The thought is gentle, a thin thread into the future that does not tug, does not demand anything of you yet. It is enough to know that tomorrow will arrive in its own time, and that you do not have to meet it halfway in advance. The thread lies lightly in your mind and then drifts aside, like a loose strand of wool on the surface of a garment. Time stretches, lengthening around you like a piece of cloth being slowly and evenly pulled from both ends. The storm begins, gradually, to soften. The heavy downpour becomes a lighter, irregular patter. The impluvium surface, though still dotted with ripples, finds longer stretches of smoothness between drops, where the reflections of the lamp settle into clearer shapes. The roar on the tiles lessens, fades, becomes the sound of isolated showers moving further away along the hills and across the rooftops, leaving behind droplets that fall from eaves and leaves in their own time, each with its own small, distinct sound. It is as if the storm itself is growing drowsy, its earlier energy now sliding into something calmer and more diffused. Your breathing has fallen into a slow, even pattern that matches the diminished rhythm outside. Inhale, cool and deep, filling the chest and belly. A small, natural pause. Exhale, warm, released, the air leaving you in a thin, steady stream. With each cycle, your muscles choose another tiny place where they can let go, a small tension at the base of the skull that had gone unnoticed until now. A hidden coil in the lower back, a tightness in the fingers that now unwind, the slight furrow between your brows that smooths out without effort. Even the muscles around your eyes soften, so that looking and seeing no longer feel like work. Your thoughts, once made of words and images, become simpler, looser. They turn into impressions, the feel of the mosaic under bare feet, the gleam of lamplight on water, the smell of incense at the lararium, the weight of the wool blanket over your body, the sound of your own name spoken softly by someone you love, and then even those impressions dissolve, thinning out until they are no more than a color, a warmth, a sense of being held. What remains is not so much thinking as a quiet awareness that does not need to attach itself to anything, content to rest without movement. The last thing you are clearly aware of is the house breathing around you, as if it too were a living creature settling into rest. The impluvium holds its quiet pool of rainwater in the atrium, reflecting the dim glow of the shrine lamp and the softer halos of the remaining lamps like fragments of a small, terrestrial constellation. Now that the rain has gentled, the surface is calmer, broken only occasionally by the drip of lingering water from the roof or the fall of a stray drop from the edge of the opening above. Each disturbance sends rings outward, faint and precise, until they kiss the marble sides and disappear. The coals in the brazier are a low red heart, pulsing gently as they cool, thin lines of heat still threading their way through the blackened charcoal, their light so subtle now that only the most attentive eye would notice. The painted Lares and genius keep their eternal watch in the niche, their eyes unblinking, their tiny hands forever mid-offer, mid-blessing. In the lamplight, the reds and golds of their garments have dimmed to softer shades, but the sense of their presence remains as firm as ever, an unspoken promise that the night will pass under their gaze just as the day did. The little serpent on the wall still curls toward its painted altar, the offerings rest in place, honey cakes and leaves casting faint, short shadows on the stone. Beyond them, the columns of the atrium stand as they have always stood, pillars of dark and light, holding up the roof and framing the square of open sky that is now only a patch of deep, drifting cloud and the occasional faint star. The whole space feels like a held breath, waiting calmly for dawn. The walls, thick and familiar, cradle all of this, your bed, your breathing body, the sleeping forms of family and slaves, the stored grain, the folded clothes, the amulets, the tools, the quiet, waiting rooms. Outside, the city is washed clean by the rain, its dust carried into gutters and cisterns, its roofs shining briefly whenever lightning still flickers beyond the hills. The sea shifts in size in the darkness beyond its harbor, its own immense, slow breathing answering the rhythm of the storm. The sky, emptied of thunder, stretches calm and invisible over roofs and hills, a vast dome you cannot see from your bed but which you can feel in the loosened air, in the way the night seems to rest more lightly on the world. Inside, in the small world of your cubiculum, in the smaller world of your own body, warmth settles, breath slows, and whatever remains of wakefulness is no more substantial than the faintest scent of oil in the air. Muscles soften, the boundary between where you end and where the bed begins grows thin and indistinct. The last traces of thought unwind into nothing, leaving only the simple fact of rest, a quiet, wordless gratitude that does not need to rise to the surface to be real. You drift, softly, down into sleep, while the ancient house, with its stone and water and watching gods, keeps its gentle, patient vigil through the rest of the Roman night, holding you and all who lie within it as securely as its walls hold back the wind and the now distant rain.